Welcome to We Got Issues, the show that looked at a sea of other comic book podcasts and said, you know what? Why not one more? Hi, I'm Brian Compton, aka BComp, and joining me always is Josh Markwith, the Brock to my Ash Ketchum. My kid is really into Pokemon right now. How you doing, Josh?
I'm good, and I will allow it again. That's another one I will allow because of nostalgia and anything for the kid, though, too. So it's we'll allow it.
He's really into Pokemon right now. Like we're now playing the Pokemon card game. I was a Magic guy growing up, but he's like legit. Like I'm like, all right, dude, let's figure this out.
Oh wow! I mean,
It's
for his age too, that's pretty great.
well, it's the basic version of it. It's like there's no like withdrawing or like retreat. There's no like weaknesses yet. That's the next round we're gonna learn. But right now it's just like the basic version. So
Oh, man, I can't wait until you try to teach him magic and he runs away from you. And
oh no, he's
you got to
not.
tap this, you got to tap that, you got to with this mountain and then this double island, but this mile-long description of what you got to do for magic, and then
Well, that's
then he
the thing. I
falls
told
asleep,
him.
and then
I told him it's like we can't do this until you read, pal. But he's reading now, so I'm like, all right. Do you partake in any collectible card games?
see, this is gonna be like me outing myself of how
There we
nerdy
go.
I am.
Oh, I knew what
So
I was doing here.
I know this is it's a trap. Um, I'm a big fan of the kind of well known anime One Piece, and I got into the One Piece cards just recently, comparatively recently, and so I've been collecting those for a while, and I've filled a big box of bulk. I pulled one of a holy grail of a set of a manga rare, which is about right now it's around like $400 something dollars.
Oh, look at
And
me! I
I
got a
know,
$400 card.
I know. Well, let's not discuss how much I paid to even get to that point where I could pull that 400 card. But I mean, I did. I'm a lot like a lot of people my age where as a kid, I was a big fan of Pokemon cards, so I got,
Yeah,
the Pokemon cards, and as an adult, I wish I kept those Pokemon cards because of
yeah,
how much they are now.
yeah. I'm sure. Well, that's kind of one of the reasons I know like all the kids right now are like even older than my kid are like really into Pokemon cards. I'm like, you know what? Let's start just collecting them now. That way, when he gets that age when like kids are really into it, like, hey, you've already got an awesome collection. You put those kids to shame. So we'll
For
see.
real, and then have them start, going on YouTube and doing those opening videos and, "Oh my god,
Well,
Charizard!
I'm trying to.
Charizard!"
Yeah, this is probably the pot calling the kettle black, but I'm trying to keep my kid as far away from internet kind of tendrils as much as possible
So,
as I
your
record
whole
this
career
podcast on the internet. Yeah, my whole
in your whole
career.
career, basically, like, stay away from what I've built.
I've done some television. Okay, all
Right,
right.
yeah.
Some of my career is
Yeah,
around
no, it's true.
television.
That's true. We shall not talk about the Double W, project, but, that's for
Attack
another
the Show.
episode for another time.
Look,
Oh,
the
Attack of
original
the Show
Attack
too,
of the
yeah.
Show was on, yeah, and I did the Will Wheaton project, and I've done React.
Uh,
I've done a bunch of stuff on
yeah.
TV, but I
Oh, and speaking of
digress.
tho but yeah, and then going we talked about my nerdiness, let's talk about your other, you tell you okay, you kinda buried the
Lead.
headline of, "Oh, I was kind of, like, into magic a little bit." Right? I've
Mhm.
seen your magic room. I think the
It's
only
not a
thing that
room. It's a corner of
well,
a closet,
a corner of a closet, but the
a
only
walk-in
thing
closet.
it's yeah, exactly. It's close. It's not as close to your comic book collection, but it is the next thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it just if again, this is a story for another time. Maybe when we do, we got issues after dark or whatever. I'll get into
Mhm.
it. But needless
Ooh.
to say, it was all because of Attack of the Show. I mean, I collected, like in high school and played a little bit in college and all that. But it was Attack of the Show. They hear, hey, we need you to write up a Magic the Gathering segment. I'm like, all right, sure. And then as a thank you, Wizards of the Coast sent me, which is the equivalent of like 20 pounds of product. And I was just like,
Oh my
oh,
goodness.
that's like giving like a recovering junkie just like a stash. I'm just
Yeah.
like, You're like 3 kilos. I'm like,
Oh my
okay.
god.
And the only reason I actually stopped collecting is A, I think Hasbro and Magic has kind of gone overboard lately. But B, I'm unemployed and that stuff is
Mm.
expensive. And I can afford one hobby right now, and that's
Right.
comic.
You're picking the right one. When it's something comics or magic, you're picking the right one.
Speaking of comics, what are we talking today, Josh?
Oh yeah, we're a comic book show, right?
We are.
Yeah, no. So today we're going to be breaking down one of the best stories in all of Marvel history, and it's about Marvel history. It's the 1994 miniseries Marvels. But before we get into all of that, we're going to
What?
do a little bit of housekeeping. Yeah, we still have a
Ooh.
sponsor.
You got a
They were
sponsor
like,
still?
man, we love that last episode. We're going to keep being your sponsor, and
Hey,
we love you guys so much.
I think we had 2 people buy something.
And one of them was my parents. All right,
What are you
so
talking about? No,
yeah,
we
well,
don't need
I
to
mean,
put that
sorry.
out there.
I mean, no, see, no, I appreciate this the support. I'm gonna
Oh, yeah.
forever and always. No, so
Let's,
going on to yeah, let's. I'm gonna actually read the ad line. So it's the copy, as we say in the whole marketing biz. So if you've ever been munching on some gummies or trail mix and said to yourself, this is good, but it would be better if it were just a little more cryptozoological, then you should, nay, need to check out Duff and Shaw snacks. From sour cherry Mothman eggs to forbidden sour gummies, Duff and Shaw's snacks and candy are curated from the mysterious and undiscovered places of planet Earth, uncovering flavors that will give you stories to tell your grandchildren. Now go to duffandshaw.com/issues today and check out all they've got and more. That's duffandshaw.com/issues, and the most legendary snacks in the world can finally be yours.
yes, I'm gonna hit the slash issues because your father
Yes.
did not use that.
Oh my goodness.
I get
So
a te
missed it by that much.
I get a text from, like, Shaw, and he's like, "Yo, I think this is probably someone that Josh knows." I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's his dad." He's like, "Well, he didn't use the issues, but we're still gonna give you credit." I'm like, "So make
Good,
sure you
good.
use .com/issues."
Yes. And anything you guys buy or use that link, it helps our podcast and
Yeah, it
it
does.
helps us, grow.
Yeah.
And, that's what we want to do. We want to get
Yeah,
this out and grow and do what any other podcast does.
exactly. Quit my real j oh, wait, I don't have a real job. Support myself with a real job.
There you go. Yeah, no, this is one of the cherry Mothman eggs before it hatches into a bigger and
Hey,
better.
there we
Hey,
go.
that's synergy right there. So okay, so we got that going, but please, yeah, check out the link.
Yeah, please do,
Buy
please do.
some of
We
their stuff.
appreciate it.
They have great stuff. It's awesome. It's so good. He even got little mustaches that go
Yeah.
with the pack, so it was great. Now, what we're talking about Marvels again. So this is the 1994 miniseries Marvels, and we're talking about it because this is the 30-year anniversary, and it's a book that cemented like the careers of Kurt Busiek, which I figured out how to say his name correctly just about a day ago. It's different in my head, and artist Alex Ross. And the first issue actually hit racks in November of 1994.
I was in 93, I think. 93. I think I messed that up. In
Well,
93.
it was 93. It wouldn't be 30 years. It would be 31 years.
Well,
So it's
but it's considered because the sell date on the cover is 94. That's why it's considered the 30th anniversary. I
oh
think the
well,
first.
excuse me.
No, I know. I know it sounds
Yeah,
to get
it's so
sad.
weird. Okay, well, so never mind. So
Well,
93.
no, and to get into that real quick, the reason like you'll see that discrepancy, just so you all know, the reason there's like a 3-month discrepancy or whatever is because back in the day, when publishers would send books to newsstands, it was like, oh, this is the March issue. Well, it's April now, toss it. And they figured, hey, if we build in enough leg room on these issues, oh, this is the May issue, and it would last longer. If we say, oh, it's the May issue, and it gets dropped off in March, it would stay on the shelves, and then that just kind of continued to grow into the point where now, like you said, the issue came out in November initially, and then was even though the cover date is January of '94.
Mm-hmm. Oh, gotcha,
So,
gotcha.
yeah, little history lesson there for you.
History. Hey, yeah, it's that's what a little mistake of a typo gave us a little history lesson, so it was perfect.
And we're gonna
And
get more
actually,
history lessons in this one because this is all about history.
goodness gracious, yeah, this is a great way. This is like one of the best like history lessons. But the book is actually a retelling of the birth of Marvel Universe through the golden age all the way up to the very beginning of the Bronze Age.
Now, another history lesson here coming your way.
Mhm.
A lot of people do ask, like, what is the difference between the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Modern Age? Real quick on that. So the Golden Age is basically the birth of superhero comics. It's basically from like 1938 up to about 1956, 1961, depending on what your kind of barometer is. And basically that's the era when superheroes are coming into fashion. You also have like Western comics, romance comics, spy comics, horror comics, all that. Post 1956, basically DC, this is the birth of the Silver Age, is actually when Barry Allen is first introduced into the Silver Age. And that's basically, there was a Flash beforehand, Jay Garrick, but they're like, hey, we're going to relaunch all of our heroes and kind of like update them for a modern audience and get away from that kind of silly sensibilities of the 40s and the 50s. And so you have, like the Flash makes his first appearance as Barry Allen. And then shortly after that, you have like a new Green Lantern, because the original Green Lantern is Alan Scott, who uses like the ring, and his weakness is wood, not the color yellow. And you get Hal Jordan, I'm
The
sorry,
best Green Lantern. Yeah, I'm
Fair.
saying the best Green Lantern, first of all. And then, a lot of people don't know that Alan Scott was one of an early Gotham superheroes as well, too.
Well, this, man, we're really going off. We're going on.
Yeah,
We're
it's good.
deviating here.
Yeah.
I actually found out that Bill Finger, the guy who basically is responsible for most of the Batman mythology as we know it, he created Alan Scott. I had no idea about that.
Oh, man, I didn't either.
I just, well, I'll talk about it later. I did talk on the early comics. But anyway, after that, so then, you have the birth of the Silver Age, and like with Marvel, the birth of their Silver Age is basically the launching of Fantastic Four #1. It was like this sort of like not revitalization, but it's like this new, kind of like human effort. It was like it put the human into superhuman over at Marvel, and you Spider-Man after that, the Avengers, eventually the X-Men, and so like this modern, I'm not modern updates, but these new versions of characters, and like I said, putting a lot more humanity into them. That ends at around the 70s, and there's not really a demarcation line where it's like, where does that exactly end? Some people think it's when Green Arrow and Green Lantern teamed up in their own book and started attacking social issues in comic books. Some people maintain that it's like when Gwen Stacy died in that Amazing Spider-Man, which is where Marvel's essentially ends. So it's kind of up in the air on where it is, but it's basically in the 70s when like comics become much more socio-political and like a lot more, like, I don't want to say negative, but definitely more dark. I mean, this is kind of a reaction to the Nixon years and stuff like that, and like all the assassinations that were kind of happening previous, and like everyone's just kind of like feeling like not shit, but like it's definitely a reaction of what's going on in the public. So that's kind of like the gold and the silver and the bronze. And the Bronze Age goes up to about 85, and that's when we have the Modern Age. So the Modern Age is current to now, and that's kind of around when Watchmen and the Dark Knight Rises, or the Dark Knight Returns, comes out. So those are your big tent poles of where each age kind of begins and ends.
Which, funny enough, it kind of like it from the Bronze Age, you said, got darker from the Silver Age, and then the Modern Age got darker from the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
And then even just craziness through everybody.
Well, and it's funny, like, I really think, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but I really do think Marvel's is a reaction to what was happening at the early ends of like the Modern Age. But we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're going to do a little thing that Brian started in Alpha Comic Book Club. It's the blurb on the back. And so it's just a quick kind of synopsis to help sell the book on the back. And I'm going to do my the trailer voice for this one. Okay. There we go. Welcome to New York. Here, burning figures roam the streets. Men in brightly colored costumes scale the glass and concrete walls, and creatures from space threaten to devour our world. This is the Marvel Universe, where the ordinary and fantastic interact daily. This is the world of Marvels, by award-winning creators Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross.
It's so funny that it's Busiek. Like, I always thought it was Busiek, and I feel like such an a-hole now. I feel like such an a-hole now.
Always in my head. But so now, Brian, what's the context of how this kind of all came together? You kind of touched on a little bit, but what's the big context?
Well, I mean, like, again, this book is like a sort of a not reinterpretation, but a looking at the birth of the Marvel Universe through a new lens, through the lens of the common man, essentially. And it's all the way through the Golden Age, up through most of the Silver Age, and ends like right basically at the dawning of the Bronze Age. It's through a photographer named Phil Sheldon, a photojournalist rather, And it's sort of like he sees all these tentpole moments in the Marvel universe and is there to document them, and you see his reaction to all of them. That's basically the premise of the book. And what it was, it kind of came together because Alex Ross, he was not a name. He's a name now. And Kurt Busiek
Mm-hmm.
is a name now. And this is the book that cemented them. This is the book that made them the names they are. But yeah, basically Alex Ross was like fresh out of art school, loves superhero comics. Is like, I wanted to, he does some advertising stuff, but he wanted to work in comics. And so he was doing everything he could to like, "Hey, I got an idea for this anthology series, and we're going to do like a Human Torch story, and we're going to do a Namor story. We're going to all this anthology." And so he was reaching out to everybody. Kurt Busiek at the time was working in the sales department at Marvel and got his stuff. He's like, this stuff is great. I got a book I'm doing because it was like independent of Marvel Universe stuff. He's like, if you want to be a part of it. Fortunately, that book fell apart. Busiek left Marvel, but he still kept like trying to ship this thing around. And so they kind of worked together, like kind of fashioning it, refitting it. Hey, it won't work as an anthology. Maybe it works as an ongoing. Maybe it works as a limited. Let's go from 6 issues to 4, all that. Eventually what happens is, of all people, Clive Barker, the guy who did like Hellraiser and all that,
Right.
he gets samples of it. He's like, this cat's legit. And he sends like the samples off to the editor at the time, which was Marcus McLaren, I believe. And he's like, I want this guy working on one of my Hellraiser books. Alex Ross wasn't particularly excited about that idea. He's like, this isn't for me, but it's in Marvel. It's a comic book. I'll do it because maybe it'll give me some more context. From there, like they meet with basically, I think it's Tom DeFalco and McLaren and all of them. They're like, hey, we really want to do this book. And so they kept like repitching it. And originally it was just going to be stories. They had no bearing in the actual Marvel mythology or the history. It was just like, hey, here's a story that took place that you didn't know about. It got so good, and they kept like fashioning. Eventually, Tom DeFalco, who I think was ESC at the time, is like, you know what? You can do it. Set it in the history, though. We want you to do the history of Marvel. And then that's kind of where it went from there, is they are like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this the right way. And they basically went through, and they like, Busiek talks about all the research he had to do for it. He was like pulling like literally old issues out of microfiche. If you know what microfiche is, that's the old library system for like reading newspapers and stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah. They show that in movies and stuff, like
yeah,
old school movies. We got to
yeah,
rent to the library.
yeah. And yeah, he literally just researched and researched. I mean, like he like talks about it because at the time in the 60s, there was basically like 8 Marvel titles. It's like, so you could easily go, okay, well, the Avengers are saving the day here. So they couldn't have been in Washington, D.C. and the FF were over here, but the X-Men were right here. Okay. And he creates a timeline and figures out where everybody was at that time, is able to figure everything out. And they're like, cool. And so everything that happens in Marvels is like in the Marvel history. There was no made up events well, I mean, there's like some stuff that's made up, the story and the characters, but overall, like these are all tentpole moments that happens. It's the birth of the Human Torch, or it's the rise of Captain America, the rise of the Avengers, the birth of X-Men and mutants, and and all the way through, all the way up until the death of Stacy.
I would love to see the cork board with all the red lines of like this, but this, and then all of the research, and then everything.
Busiek talks about it. It's all in notebooks.
Yeah.
Like he has it all in notebooks, and it's like he said. Actually, the problem that became, and this is why one of the sequels kind of fell apart, is because as you get into this late 60s and the 70s, is like they started putting more books out, and it was a lot harder to be like, we got Power Man and Power Man and Iron Fist over here. We've got this character doing this. We got the Punisher over here. It just became. It was just like that thing where it just spreads out, and it was like almost impossible to do the proper research, in the book.
Yeah, and crazy for it to come out too at the time of comics, because this was the peak middle 90s, and this was
93, 94.
And I think at the time too, there was either before or right after that mass exodus of all the Marvel artists kind of going to making their own company of Image.
Well, if you want to talk about the historical context at the time, it's like at that time, yes, Image Comics had just formed. Like they had been around for, I think they formed in 93. Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Willis Profucio, Jim Valentino, Eric Larson, all those cats.
Oh, forgot Rob Liefeld. You never forget Rob Liefeld.
Rob Liefeld. There's 7 of them. And, it was 7 of them. They take off. They form Image Comics. So you have like all mass exodus. The other thing that's going on too, there's 2 other big factors. Is like at this time, comic books are seeing a huge boom now. Because you have the Image creators, and so like It's a big market. Everyone thinks it's going to be the big market. You're coming off the heels of Death of Superman, which sold in the millions. You're coming off the heels of X-Men, which sold in the millions. So you have like it's this huge boom, and the card market, the actual like sports card market, had just collapsed. So everyone's like, well, let's go into comics and do that. And then it didn't even last six months before that market collapsed. So you have like those two factors. The third factor in this is at that time, all comic books were starting to go really dark. You, like I said,
Mhm.
we're just coming off the heels of the death of Superman. You're coming off the heel, or you're coming right out of like Nightfall, which is when Batman gets his back broken, and they replace him with the dark, gritty, Azrael. You have like the return of Barry Allen, which is really a dark storyline in Flash comics. This is leading into Parallax, Green Lantern, and destroying the Green Lantern. It's leading into that. This is kind of the vibe at the time. You have Marvel that's going super dark. You've got Daredevil, like, him changing his costume into the black, armored thing. You got Fatal Attractions going on, which is literally Wolverine getting his adamantium ripped out of his, off his body by
Mhm.
Magneto. So everything is like just really dark, and it's like grim and gritty. And like I said, you have Image Comics that's really doubling down on that whole thing too. Everything bladed,
Spawn,
everything Spawn, exactly. Everything's
Youngblood.
just like young blood. Everything is just really gritty. And I think this was like, hey, remember when comics were fun? Remember when comics were like light and
And hope.
yes, there's some heavy moments. This is a celebration of nostalgia. You know what I mean?
It was a very much a celebration of, like we were saying before, the silver and golden age of comics at the time, and in the way of Alex Ross's art.
Yeah.
His if you haven't seen his art and you haven't kind of seen, Google him. It's very like photorealistic. He has a lot of different models and stuff like it. It's very
Well,
the paintings.
he uses the models for lighting effect, and I think he uses it very effectively because some people take those photorealism and then they just trace over it. It's like he uses
Yeah.
those as like, okay, that's how the shading on the face would look, and he paints it and all of that. It's interesting because did you read it when it came out? Did you, or were you one of those people kind of ready to trade when it came out?
I read it in trade later on because it wasn't.
Okay.
It was the 90s were, it's kind of like early in my comic book reading, and so I mean,
Yeah,
if when I might have seen some stuff here and there on it,
yeah,
like
yeah,
because this is before
yeah,
you could just Google it, or and stuff like that. So I might have seen like an issue here and there, and like, oh wow, that looks like, the art kind of caught my eye and everything. But it was very much my early days of not knowing how comics are. In
yeah,
early days, if like,
yeah,
ooh,
yeah. I know.
it's X-Men, the cartoon was around this time, or no, it was later, but so it was even
No, but
before got huge into it. So I mean, it was very much when I really got into it in, I think, college.
okay,
College is when I found the book at the library, and it was like,
yeah,
just I've heard of this. I've seen the covers everywhere.
yeah,
The Alex Ross art. So why don't I check this out? And it was just
yeah.
a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I was collecting back then, and I remember when I saw like, well, I was gonna say real quick to even all that. It's funny when this book was kind of greenlit, Marvel was scared. They were putting out like I think the issues were 4.95 at the time. They came out with like an acetate like plastic cover that went
Mm,
over a hardcover, and these are fully painted by an unknown artist and essentially an unknown writer tackling an era of like nostalgia. Like I said, the gold. They did not want them to do the golden age at all.
right.
Like, can you just skip to Captain America? Why are we talking about Namor and gold and the first Human Torch? And Marvel was kind of like, you don't have Wolverine or the X-Men or Ghost Rider or any of these characters in here. Like, are you crazy? This is gonna flop, and this is gonna flop hard. You see what is buying or selling right now. Kids are buying
Mhm.
the bladed Batman and Spawn. Like, where's the chains? It's like the Marvel was kind of like a little like worried about this. And I'll tell you right now, when that first issue hit, I was in awe. I was in literal awe. I mean, I was just a kid. I was like in maybe high school, and I remember seeing that. I was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, literal awe over these issues. I remember Wizard magazine at the time losing their mind over it. I remember just seeing like um some of the stills or the pictures in it and some of the art in it was just like, this is a photograph. This is an art. This is a photograph. Like, that's what Angel would look like. That's what Galactus would look like.
Mhm.
I still remember that feeling of like seeing when I opened up issue 3 and you see Galactus like floating in the air over all of New York City and just like him like kind of like picking himself up off the air. I was like, holy shit, this is insane.
Or even the full page panel, before that with the sky on fire and all the
Yep.
rocks and stuff. When
Oh yeah.
after if you've read the actual story in the books, when Galactus came out, you're like, it kind of puts another perspective on it. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
remember that. I remember
Yeah.
that moment. Like,
Yeah.
and in like you were saying too, it was just crazy at the time that it came out. It's nostalgic, and before that, were the big thing was what holographic covers, because
Yep.
the
Oh,
shops
there's
could
fail
resell.
attractions. Yep.
Yeah, and then I mean, just like the Spider-Man,
Oh yeah.
the Spider-Man
Oh yeah.
300.
Yep.
It was, they did 4 different covers of it, just
Yep.
selling out.
Yeah.
So it's like something from 2 relatively unknowns about a time that it's also relatively unknown, in
Yeah.
introducing an unknown character.
Yeah. Well, I
So
mean,
there's a lot of unknowns.
your main character is a one-eyed old man photojournalist who has no
Right.
superpowers. It's like, oh, like, whoa,
Who's
whoa, slow
cranky
down there,
most of the
Marvel
time.
here. Yeah, what's that? Yeah, it's cranky.
He's
Yeah, he's
cranky most of the
cranky.
time.
Yeah.
He's a curmudgeon. And
Um, Go ahead.
and then, yeah, just in it for how it was, and at the time, it was just a very much a huge pivot, and
Yeah.
I think that's what made it work.
Yes. Well, it's funny because this was done right. And we'll get into
Uh-huh.
like some of the spin-offs, but like it was such a success that Marvel like just started pumping out after that, like a ton of these like painted like slice of life stories or like, grounded superhero stories. There was like a Wonder Man one, there was a Tales to
Uh-huh.
Astonish one, which was there was the Cap and the Iron Man and the Doc Strange. Like they pumped out a ton of these with the acetate cover on them too. The plastic, sheeting on the cover, and they were fine. But they weren't this.
And I heard Alex Ross talking about it, because he has his own YouTube channel. It's like from years ago.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And he talks about how the paper stock was different
Yep.
on what it
It
was
was like
printed on
glossy
itself
stock.
too.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
glossy
So I
stock.
mean, not just the cover, but just it was a premium book. Like,
Yeah,
that's
it
the thing
was.
too. It was a
Oh,
premium book.
well, like I said, at the time, I think comics were going for 195, and I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, those issues were 4.95 each. $5. It's like
Damn,
you're
that's
expecting
like current
kids.
prices.
Yeah, it is. But if it's like you're expecting kids to pick that up, like that's insane.
Right. And what made you want to buy it and what you get is all the different Easter eggs that Alex Ross kind of put into each one. Um,
Oh,
all that the I love the when you're reading through this, all you have to really pay attention to the art, because it's very much like he has a lot of fun of these different background people and background characters. Like, what were some of your favorite ones that you caught? Like, it
well,
goes from the very beginning.
I mean, the thing is, like I said, it is a retelling of Marvel Comics #1 all the way through like Marvel Comics #8 or 9, I believe.
Uh,
The first issue and issue 0. Well, I'll get into that in a second. I guess we can break the
yeah.
notes later. But like one of my favorite moments from like just a joking perspective is in the first issue. J. Jonah Jameson there's a character
Uh,
there's essentially J. Jonah Jameson, but Marvel wouldn't officially let them name the character Jonah because, like, well, he's still alive right now, and due to our sliding scale of time, he wouldn't have been alive in World War II, so we can't have you do that. And they're like, but and Busiek was like, no, actually, he would have been because of this, 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 and this. So what they did is they drew a guy who clearly looks like a young J. Jonah Jameson, has the same attitude as J. Jonah Jameson, same hair as J. Jonah Jameson, and what they did was like they had the light come down on
uh,
his face, so his nose casts a shadow, forming the mustache of J. Jonah Jameson. I love those like little tricks of the light,
yeah, it's
yeah,
very smart and creative way of
yeah,
going around it. And like, some of my favorite Easter eggs were in that first issue, in the crowd of the
mhm,
Human Torch
yep,
unveiling. You see Clark Kent, you see Lois
yes,
Lane, or
yes.
supposedly Clark
No,
Kent
it's
and Lois Lane. Oh yeah, yes.
well,
And then
because Clark Kent and Lois Lane do exist in the Marvel universe.
that's right, that's canon. But then the Paper Boy looks very much like
That's
Billy
Billy
Batson.
Batson. Yep.
And I think when we get into the Alicia
Shazam.
Masters, Shazam! When we get to the
Captain
Alicia
Marvel.
Masters, what? Oh, we have to be careful. Is he's always going to be
Yeah.
Captain Marvel to me, but we get moving on. When we get to Alicia Masters, her gallery and their showing of all the statues and everything that she's made. One of the people kind of like makes fun of the thing or kind of gossips. Looks
Oh, it's
exactly like B.
it's B. Arthur.
Arthur.
It's B.
Yeah, it's
Arthur.
B. Arthur.
Not even. It's like that's B. Arthur right there.
Right,
That's Golden Girls B. Arthur.
right, and then Danny Ketch towards the end.
Yeah.
All these little Easter eggs that makes you really pay attention when you're reading it, but also rereading it. You have when you're like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. Like even like the Fantastic Four's wedding in the background, you see all the Beatles in separate shots. Like, Paul is next to. Like, I think Karen Page is like, is that Paul next to me? Paul McCartney, and you see John and Ringo and George in the background. Yeah, it's full of that stuff. In fact, I recommend. I know obviously we're gonna recommend this book, but I recommend getting the 25th anniversary edition of the book because it has all of the stuff, all of the covers, all of the variants, all of the scripts, and they added all the annotation too. So literally it's like issue 0, here's this person, here's this, and issue 1, like panel 7, page 12, you see this person, and it's like, this is Brian Azzarello. I'm like, Brian Azzarello, the 100 Bullets writer? Like, he was, did they know who, it's like, he was around in 94. Yeah, like, I was like, oh crap. I'm like, that's definitely Brian Azzarello. There's like cameos by John Romita Sr. There's one shot, I'm like, that's clearly Jack Kirby in the car with Stan. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And
it's
they were definitely having fun.
It's a big compendium.
It's a thick boy, but it's worth it.
It's the second best breakdown other than our podcast. So
there you go. Yeah, we're skipping all the details to give you the best.
yeah, exactly. We just want to. But definitely, like you said, check out the 25th anniversary, and we've been talking about the nostalgia and the Easter eggs and stuff. But let's talk about kind of the main moments that, or through the issues. And we're not going to get too deep into these, but we're just going to discuss mainly like the big moments that Phil kind of goes through. And the very first one that we've touched on is Human Torch, the original Human Torch.
Yes, so it's funny. A lot of people attribute there's a 0 issue and then there's issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
0 issue, a lot of people attribute to Kurt Busiek as the writer, or Kurt Busiek, as the writer, and it wasn't. That was actually something Alex Ross had done. It was almost like a proof of concept back in the day, and he got I believe the writer was Steve Darnell, is the guy he wrote Uncle Sam with, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, he's misattributed to Busiek. Like, even on Wikipedia, if you look it up on Wikipedia, it's like, the 0 issue produced by Ross and Busiek. It was like, no, that's not what happened. And actually, that issue was broken up, and I believe because it's 8 pages long, I believe. It's broken up into 2-page chapters in Marvel's not anthology book, but their like in-house comic book they had at the time called Marvel Age. It was actually done over 4 issues, and a lot of people didn't know that. I didn't even know that. I found that out, But yeah, it was something he had done.
I found that out right now.
There you go.
So there we go.
But what it is it's a retelling of the origin. And it's the only thing that's not from the perspective of Phil Sheldon. It's all from like, this is the birth of Human Torch. And they had actually, just at that same time, I believe they had just retconned the Human Torch's origins, where like you find out the reason he learned is because Phineas Horton had stuck a microphone down this like cement shaft where he had been imprisoned, and he was able to put headphones on and like learn how to read and write and talk and learn history and all that. And they included that all in there because it had literally just come out in comic books like a year or 2 before.
But and then as you said, 0 was very stylized too. It wasn't your normal panel stuff. No. It was like is Alex Ross kind of showing off. It was like his full page, maybe just one picture of the Human Torch with the stylized lettering around him. It was great. And then it just kind of goes into the beginning of because Marvel, a lot of people don't know, Marvel Comics wasn't Marvel Comics at first. It was Timely Comics.
Yeah.
And then that moved into Atlas, and then that became Marvel Comics. And
the first issue of Timely Comics, or not first issue, but that first issue that was called Marvel Comics #1, which has the first appearance of Namor, Human Torch, Angel, and I forget the fourth one. Was it not Wizard? It's someone else like that though. Maybe it's Kazar. I forget. I gotta look
I
it
know.
up.
I think Kizaru was a little bit later because he was,
Yeah,
but
but I know there's
and it's
4 of them. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and it's Angel, but not
Not
the
the
mutant
Marvel
Angel.
Angel.
Yeah,
Yeah, and when we say Human Torch, it's the android Human Torch, not the
it,
Fantastic Four Human Torch.
right. Jim Hammond.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and Phil's there for the unveiling of the Human Torch, and then also the battles that Human Torch and I keep saying Human Torch battles that Torch and Namor had. And
Mhm.
what's kind of funny, I've kind of realized throughout the book, when you read it all at once, you're like, Namor is kind of a little fickle bitch. Like he is back and forth, like snip,
Yeah.
snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, yeah. You have no idea the toll it has to be a villain and a hero.
Right. I mean, his allegiance is much like the waves, the in and out of the waves. Oh,
Yeah.
I just thought of that. I know. I kind of
It's
the genius of myself.
there's some real pretty stuff in that first issue. I mean, for me, like I said, the nostalgia doesn't hit as hard because that's not like the heroes I cared about. I don't really care about Namor
Mhm.
that much or Human Torch for that matter. I like seeing like the All Winter Squad, which is essentially the Invaders, but they had to
Yeah,
call them the All Winter Squad. But I like seeing Captain America and Bucky and all those cats, at the end of the issue and all of that.
yeah. That last kind of spread
Mhm.
panel was so good, and then I really liked how he drew the Human Torch, which was a lot different than normal. I think he discusses how he built that off of he was doing a Terminator
His
comic book.
first work was a Terminator comic book. It was
Yeah.
the exoskeleton coming through the fire.
Yes, exactly. So he built upon that, and it was much different because it wasn't just colors with black squiggly lines. It was much of like orange and yellow put together. It was
It's gorgeous.
yeah, it was gorgeous, but also it's very it's a kinetic static. If
Yeah.
if that helps it, but I mean that was just such a that's why they put it on the cover.
Mhm.
A lot of this, like when you see Marvels a lot, you see that first image
And
of
it's
him.
also an homage to the first issue of Marvel Comics, which is Human Torch
Mhm.
burning through the wall and a guy like firing a gun at him or whatever. And it's an
Right.
homage to that, which I think they like again, they break down like I mean, like every single panel in this book was like meticulously thought out. Like I cannot like either it's a direct representation from another issue, or it's like here's what the perspective would have been from this event from Phil Sheldon's point of view, you know.
It Yeah, it's very much like an archaeological piece of
Yeah.
Marvel.
Yeah.
It's one of those uh things if you had what if you needed only one thing to give to somebody about the history of Marvel, Marvel's is probably one of your best bets because of
Yeah.
how intricate it is.
Yeah. Um
Now the next moment though was another really big moment with Marvel's first family.
Oh, so issue 2 now. We're moving into issue 2.
Yeah. I mean, because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first issue
But
is mainly Human Torch and
it's all the
Namor
golden
just
it's
fighting each
the
other.
golden age wrapped up. It's
Yeah.
all the golden age stuff, which again, like, it's fine. It's not for me, but I get why Marvel was, like, reticent to, like, do that, but I also appreciate they were like, "No, we're doing this," and I'm glad they did.
Yeah, and I did like Phil's point of view at the time too, because he was pushing off his engagement because he's like, who am I when all these people are like
Yeah.
these Marvels are around. So I mean, yeah, and then that moves on to like we said, issue 2, and that kind of gets more into the Silver Age, and that's when the first family of Marvel, like a big moment with them. What was kind of that big moment?
Well, it's the wedding, I would imagine what you're
The
referring
wedding.
to.
Yo, yes, that's what I'm
Yeah.
referring to.
Okay,
That's what
okay,
we
okay.
have next on our script. Yep.
Oh, I could
I
look
did
like it.
that.
We
I'm
don't have a
kidding.
script.
I'm kidding. This
This
is
is
all off
all
the cuff, right?
we're just bam,
Bullet
bam, bam,
points.
bam,
Yeah, yeah,
bam, bam,
bang, bang,
bam.
bang. No, so we're talking about the wedding of Reed Richards and Sue Storm,
I
and all the
Good.
stuff that led to it. Oh, and all the stuff that led to it, like
Yeah.
just the like we said, it was Fantastic Four coming out, the first time, and the Thing being seen for the first time. The Avengers and the X-Men.
Well, it was also not just that, wasn't this also like the new Avengers when it's like the rest of the Avengers left and Cap forms like
Yeah.
the Hawkeye, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch takes the villains basically and makes them heroes at this point.
Yeah, like, some people have called like Captain America and his merry friends or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
Which yeah, it's hard to follow up with Thor and Hulk and Ant-Man and the Wasp, but
Yeah.
Hawkeye and
Yeah, a dude
and
shoots arrows and a guy who runs fast, and a girl
Yeah,
who, you know,
at
has
the
hair.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
So two terrorists and a thief or a
Yeah.
bad guy, and this is all going at the same time as like the mutant emergence as well too, and the emergent mutant panic.
I'm gonna take over for a second here because I want to say like this was what made me fall in love with the book.
Mhm.
The cover is a shot of Angel carrying a very clearly mutant little girl. She's got wide eyes. She almost looks alien, or I don't want to say demonic, but she looks alien, like like one of those like forehead aliens. And there's just a crowd around them, like muties go to hell, that kind of stuff, die. And he's just carrying her out of this frightened little girl out of the crowd. And it to me, it was like that was when I talk about like the awe and shock, like that was like that seeing that cover image was a moment for me in comics. It really was. I absolutely was like, A, this is beautiful, but B, what is going on here? And as the story goes on, like I said, we have this happy moment happening where the Richards family and the Storms they're getting married. All the Beatles are there, and Nick Fury's there, and the Avengers are there. And literally that same night, and it's cool because, again, Busiek did all his research and he found out the only time this could happen is the day of the wedding because the FF would have gone this way. And then, the X-Men were over here, the Avengers were doing this. And you find out that same night is when the Sentinels make their attack on mutants. And mutant hysteria just goes rampant. People are in the streets with pitchforks and torches and like, there's a mutant around, we're going to beat him. And they're like, it's just a mad panic. And Phil Sheldon gets caught up in this. At one point, he runs into the five X-Men, the original X-Men of Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, and Angel. And like at one point, he instead of like being a photojournalist and like recording the moment, he picks up a brick, chucks it, and hits Iceman in the head. And Iceman's about to lose it, and Cyclops like, no, they're not worth it. And those words just haunt through him.
I love that moment as well because it's the lighting of it is from
Yeah,
Cyclops. It's all that red lighting. It's from
they're in an
his
alley.
visor,
Yeah,
but
they're in
shows
a dark
and also,
alley.
yeah, and it shows just with Cyclops his powers and stuff. Like you can tell how pissed he is too because of
Yeah,
how even with his visor on, how bright it is from his head. Like it's all red and it's the
yeah,
shadows are so
yeah.
good.
It illuminates all, and you just see like Angel above him with his wings. He looks like he's just crying. It's a gorgeous panel, and it's kind of haunting. And like Phil is just like, oh, what did I do? What did I do?
Mm.
This all leads to Phil coming home, and he knows that his little girls. So he has two little girls at this point. He's married, and he sees like the two little girls are like kind of keeping food, like sneaking food off the table, and he thinks, oh, they're probably just you know there's a stray dog they're feeding. Come to find out, the little girl that's on the cover, she's living in the basement. And all of his like hatred and anger towards mutants is like he's confronted with it right there. And he's reminded of his time in World War II when he found the first camps at Auschwitz. And it's that same horror in their eyes. And you see a panel and he sees it in her eyes and he melts. He's just like, what have we done? That could be my daughter right there. And it's one of those things where like I don't want to say like breaking to tears thinking about it, but it is like an emotional thing where it's like, he's trying to keep her covered up, but like he's like there are literally people running around outside his house with like pitchforks looking for mutants, and he knows even though they're neighbors and they're all friends, if they found out he had a mutant hiding in his basement, they would burn his house down and kill his family. And he has to struggle with that. He's like, no, this is the right thing to do, and he protects her. So lo and behold, the Sentinels attack, and he comes home after this whole thing to find out like that his little girls are like, she's gone, she's gone. He finds a note, and it's like the little girl left a note, like crayon, just saying, thank you so much for taking care of me. But if I stay here, your family will be harmed, and I can't live with myself. Thank you for the food, bye. And it's just like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh
And
God.
it just ends there. Like what how is she gonna be?
Yeah,
And you
we
just,
don't
I
know.
don't know.
We don't know. We don't know whatever happens to her. I, at the time, chose to believe that the image of Angel lifting her out of the crowd was her being saved.
Mm,
That's how I kind of interpreted that moment. Like we never got closure in the issue, but I choose to believe that that issue of, the cover of Angel lifting her out of there and saving her like an angel was
mm,
like my way of like, she had to have lived. She had to have lived. Um, do you want a spoiler for what, or did you read?
Well,
Are you,
we'll
okay,
talk about it
okay,
because we talk about it later. But
sure,
yeah, and it was with the dichotomy of it is just amazing how the highest of highs with this wedding in
yeah,
this wedding that they were also building through
yeah,
throughout the whole issue. Like
yeah.
everybody's getting ready. All this energy is like the electricity in New York, and we're ready
Oh,
for
and
this
also
wedding. And
like
then boom,
the FF are like
reality.
the Storm and Reed are like the it couple, you know. It's like, oh, we
Yeah,
got the paparazzi here, and like superheroes are so cool. There's like, superhero happiness, and like essentially E is there, not E, but like that kind of
yeah.
like that vibe. And then you have the other side of the spectrum, which is like the dark, dirty side of all of this, and like just the hatred and bigotry coming out.
Right away too. Like you said, it was the same night and
Same
the
night.
um same attack, the same night of the attack, and
Yeah,
just everything was just so crazy, and just his panic as
yeah,
well. His energy from being hatred to panic is on a dime,
yeah,
and to like you said, see the little girl was just.
yeah,
It also like made you as a reader go, oh no, like
yeah,
what is he gonna, you're on your edge, like what is he gonna do? Because this
yeah,
whole time before he's been very he not only his hatred to mutants and stuff, because that was compounded before from his hatred to the superheroes in general,
yeah,
because of just it's how they were, how
yeah,
he feels inadequate and
yeah.
less
And
than,
it's, I
and
can't
now
defend my family,
yeah, and here's somebody who everybody he found, it's a way for his hateful energy was to go towards something like mutants, and now
Yeah.
here's something he's confronted with it in a very drastic way.
So ironically enough, despite the fact that this is kind of quote unquote an X-Men centric issue, it's the only one with any of the X-Men in it. This was the
Uh,
lowest selling of all of the 4 issues.
oh, weird, and especially at a time when X-Men was
Well,
huge.
well, and it's funny, that's what they thought. Well, what happened then, if you want the logic behind it, is like everyone orders like high on the first issues. First issues always sell well.
Mm,
But then they drop on the second issue because like, oh, we're not going to sell as many because it's issue 2. So they kind of cut their orders in half. By the time that first issue hit, like all of a sudden, like orders like, oh my God, get us more, get us more. So that was when
yeah.
the third issue's orders went in. So everyone upped their orders up for the third issue. So you have like this weird, like first high, second low, third back high, and fourth back high.
Hmm.
The second one was like the least amount, which Busey had mentioned. She's like, yeah, I thought it was gonna be the number one because literally there's Angel on the cover.
Right. And it's crazy, the back and forth of comic buyers. It's kind of, the psychological, just you know
Yeah.
what is behind our nerd brains when we're trying to buy stuff.
I don't know. I'm just looking for good
Who
comics to
even
read.
knows?
I'm just looking
And
trying to read good stuff,
exactly,
man. So
and
issue
which we
three,
talk about on this podcast.
yeah, we should, right? Issue 3. Now, you kind of teed this up a little bit earlier, but what's the big moment here?
See, this was my favorite issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was my favorite issue just because you have it of how cinematic it is, and then
Yeah,
how it's just very dire. That's the word I want to say, because it's like this is the Galactus issue. This is when Galactus and Silver Surfer comes to Earth for the first time and makes himself known, and it has I like the line, "Who's that the tall guy and the bald guy out there?"
yeah. Oh,
Is
the
a lot
Watcher.
to the
Yeah.
Watcher,
Which
and
I love that his only appearance is like in the distance, like it's just this
right,
tall
he's
dude,
just looking. Yeah,
which is great. Like that's how they would have seen it at that time.
right, and just all these huge pages of um the before Galactus gets there. It's the Silver Surfer trying to make the world look uninhabitable, unsavory
Yeah,
for him, and in the introduction of the Silver Surfer, and then you have the Fantastic Four going against Galactus, and they lose that first time, and you have everybody starting to panic, like this is the end of the world, and you hear all the updates in the news in the background, and then just everybody's getting ready for this is it. This is
yeah,
what are we supposed to be? What are we going to do? Like, there's nothing to do when the best among us have lost. And the huge drawing of Galactus and the Silver Surfer drawings and just his reflectiveness and
Yeah.
the Fantastic Four in the background and just and Phil's switch too. Like this is the beginning of the switch. It goes kind of into the next issue of we are the problem. Like these superheroes are for us, and we don't. They're
Respect
saving
them
us,
or
and we
yeah.
don't deserve it.
Yeah.
What did you think about this kind of moment, this issue?
I mean, like I said, from an art standpoint, like it's beautiful. Like I said, that a shot of
Uh-huh.
Galactus, like literally over the city is, that full page spread is beautiful. Um, I'm not as, I understand like, all the FF love and all that. I do like the FF. I'm not trying to, but like
Yeah.
this is a seminal moment in FF history. So, but I wasn't as into the FF at the time, so it kind of like fell on deaf ears as a rereader of it and someone who reads it now. Like I definitely am like, oh, this is great. At the time, I was like, it's cool. It's pretty though. Now, like looking back on it and like all the nuance that went into it, like there's like, I think, this is also where because the Avengers don't show up in this issue, correct? Or if they do, it's
Not
like,
really. Yeah.
yeah. It explains like where were the rest of the teams? Well, it turns out they were out in South America or whatever. There's like
Yeah.
a bubble encased in the city. Um, Overall, though, I really did like it on the reread. Like I said, that going through the annotation and seeing not the Easter eggs, but all the care that went into crafting, which is arguably one of the biggest moments in Fantastic Four history. This
In
is
Marvel comic history too.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, yeah. Even beyond that, it's this is when Jack Kirby and Stan Lee at the time were just firing on all cylinders. You know, and to recreate that moment, it's like it'd be like recreating, the Sergeant Pepper. If you're the Beatles, like
right.
that's kind of what this was a recreation of. And I don't want to say to improve upon it, but to put it through that lens, I think they did an excellent job.
For sure. And I don't think they were even trying to improve on it as well. It
No,
was just a retelling of it from another point of view, which is,
yeah,
the every man point of view. And I love this moment, not only for because I am a Fantastic Four stan. Like I've
okay,
been a fan of them for a long time. The time when the Fantastic Four didn't even have a book was kind of a dark time in my comic book collecting and
Oh,
reading.
when I Perlmutter shut it down back in
Yeah,
like,
man,
well,
if we could have a whole
we'll
thing about
discuss
Ike
all the FF stuff
Perlmutter.
later.
I don't want to discuss Ike Perlmutter. I don't want to get angry. My
Don't
blood
ruin.
pressure is already at a too
Don't
high.
discuss
I
it.
don't want to
Not
talk.
during Marvels. Marvels is a safe space.
Yeah, exactly. Don't ruin this for me. But this was I love because a lot of people don't realize how much comes from the Fantastic Four
Yeah,
itself,
yeah,
and but with Galactus and stuff, this wasn't just a big moment, with us as readers, but I think also in the Marvel universe as a whole, Galactus is widely known as he is more of an act of nature than
mhm.
anything else. Like this,
Yeah.
trying to stop a
He's a force of
hurricane,
nature.
force
Yeah,
of
yeah,
nature. That's the better
yeah,
word to say. Yeah, he's like a hurricane or a tornado. You can't stop it. You just have to get ready for it.
yeah.
And this was a thing where Earth or Terra or Terran people or whatever it's called, how Marvel people call it,
Yeah.
they were able to beat Galactus, which was unheard of at the time. Like he has destroyed civilizations that are much more technologically
Powerful.
advanced and more powerful than Earth was ever. So it's just a crazy moment in Marvel Universe time as well, which I love. It's kind of like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
awesome. You thought you could come here? I don't know why people don't use that a lot enough, or they don't use it enough. Like in the world of comics, you could just when people try to take over Earth, you don't hear a lot of people saying, we've beaten Galactus like more than once. We've beaten Thanos
Yeah.
more than once. Like
Well, that's
we've
why there's
done all
that.
this.
As I said, there's that storyline. I think it's like called Maximum Security. They're like all the aliens in the universe are just like, Earth is like a real problem. They're really let's just warn them off. Let's just
Yeah.
we're gonna put up the shield around it. Let's just keep them out of our business.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's just when you see stories like the galactic people getting together and they have like all these councils and stuff, and they talk down about Earth. It's like Owatu kind of loves us, right?
Yeah.
He's our best friend right now, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
just that moment kind of helps with that whole just again they beaten Galactus.
Yeah.
It's like I stopped the hurricane with a threat at the time too. It's a threat. He didn't actually do anything. They did it with a threat. Like he played poker with the whole Earth civilization.
The ultimate nullifier.
Ultimate nullifier, which is the weirdest looking thing in the world. But
that's just Jack Kirby art at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's this issue or it's the next or the one before. There's like at one point though, the Avengers are being hated on. And then they're like, oh, we love the Avengers again. It was like an Avengers Day. And I love that there's a shot of all of the Avengers. This is kind of like one of those Easter eggs I love where it's Cap, Quicksilver, Scarlet, and Hawkeye. But the Captain America is a cutout because of Captain America at that time was somewhere else in another book. So they're like, to make it work, they're like they put a stand in it. You even see Quicksilver kind of giving it a dirty look.
It's fun. Again, those little details make it amazing. And
I'm pretty sure it was issue 3 when they did that. But yeah, I love that.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then going with the love of superheroes and stuff at the time, it kind of shows in the next issue just how public opinion changed on a dime, and how Phil's trying to, as a journalist and as a man, because he has his own book, Marvels, he's working on. Because he's like, everybody kind of turns a dime on superheroes, and they are hated again. And and you see Phil's kind of his stretch of his morality. It's like, I have a book coming out, and now people are hating these superheroes. What the hell?
Well, they wanted him to do, as a follow up, they wanted to do a book on villains or the dark heroes that way, because like he's like, I don't want to do that. We should be celebrating these characters or these cats, not like not bringing them down.
And also at the time too, one of his best friends and colleagues, J. Jonah Jameson, is one of the forefront of the superhero hate, and this kind of delves into him turning where he wants to exonerate now.
Well, Spider-Man.
Exonerate Spider-Man. I was saying just exonerate the image of superheroes in general, and I think he is what he thinks is the catalyst, or what can really do that, is exonerating Spider-Man, which I love. I love his love for Spider-Man and hatred for Peter Parker.
Peter Parker, let's keep all that wily kid. What does he keep saying, like that little rat or something like that?
Yeah, little rat or wily kid, because he thinks he's just using Spider-Man's image for his own money, benefits and stuff. It's so funny how much he hates him. And Peter Parker's just like, "Hi, Mr. Phil." Like,
"Hey, what's up, Phil?" It's like, "Get out of here, you that wily little turd,
you little jerk."
This is interesting. So Peter Parker talks in the book, but you never actually see Spider-Man ever say a word in any of Marvels. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't. No,
yeah.
No. Now that I think about it, it's only the epilogue. Not the epilogue, was with the secondary stuff.
If you go back and read it, Peter Parker talks like he's always, like I said, "Hey, what's up, Mr. Sheldon?" But Spider-Man himself never says anything.
And going with that though, too, I mean, you don't really see any of the other superheroes really say anything. Maybe Reed Richards, or when they're in uniform.
Like
you do have Reed Richards does.
The Cyclops does, like you said, they're not worth it.
We just talked about that, huh?
Yeah, I know it, but like Peter Parker, or like Spider-Man specifically, and this issue is about basically in Spider-Man's history, he had, I wouldn't say a mentor, but like his Commissioner Gordon was Captain Stacy, who was the father of Gwen Stacy. And what happens is Captain Stacy in Spider-Man comics gets killed, and it's during a fight between him and Doc Ock. And what happens is, like, Dr. Ock's arms hit like a chimney, and they're about to smash like a kid, and Captain Stacy runs and saves this kid's life, but in the process gets crumbled by the statue, or by the chimney. Spider-Man picks his body up and runs off with him, and everyone's like, "Oh, Spider-Man did it. Spider-Man killed Captain Stacy," even though no, that's not what happened. As Phil Sheldon kind of investigates, he gets confirmation that Doc Ock did it, but Doc Ock's not going to admit to it. Doc Ock's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't know." And so he goes on this mission. I'm going to exonerate Spider-Man of this. I'm going to prove to the world that Spider-Man is a hero. And so he teams up with Gwen Stacy, Captain Stacy's daughter, like, "Hey, we're going to find this. We're going to clear his name, and we're going to do all this stuff." This leads to what we had mentioned earlier, the Bronze Age, where Gwen Stacy is captured by Green Goblin, and it leads to the infamous fight on, was it the Brooklyn Bridge? Or the Manhattan Bridge? I don't remember. Brooklyn Bridge. And they have this epic fight, and it results in Gwen being tossed off the side, and Spidey, throws out a web, catch her, and catches her ankle, and you see this infamous snap.
Mhm.
Now, still, even in the book, it's funny, like, Busey talks about this, like, there's still a lot of debate whether or not it was the web that snapped her neck or whether she had died of shock when she got hit by the Green Goblin and got thrown off. It's pretty much at this point canon that, yeah, it was the web.
It's the web.
Spider-Man threw a web down, he justifies it like his spider sense was off. He had been sick. He was tired. He had just gotten beaten up. And so his spider sense was off. And that's why he messed up on that web. And then they go into it later on in a what if comic drawn by the same artist. I think it was, I remember who it was, Gil Kane, where instead of throwing a web down, Spider-Man shoots down and is able to catch her. And that's how she lives. So she would have lived, if he had done something differently. But Bill at the time sees this snap, and that's just like, he's like, I'm done. I'm done, yo. This is it. He should have saved her. We're just casualties to these people. That's all we are.
Yeah, and his thought process was like, oh, she can't be dead. No, she's not dead. He's a superhero. They save people. No, this can't be dead. No, and then his slow realization of what happened, and it's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking at the time reading, the actual book, and then heartbreaking again through his lens.
Yeah,
it's a great depiction of what happened, and I love Alex Ross's art throughout this. He kind of makes Spider-Man look like he's wearing a suit.
Yeah.
It's not just his skin. The same with Green Goblin, and it's depicted very, very well.
It's human. It's human. Even like they said, he excels in making superhumans human. They're larger than life, but they're still human beings underneath that spandex or that cloth or whatever it is that they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
The issue ends on kind of a downer in that regard. Phil Sheldon's like, I'm done. I'm going to retire. I'm done with this. I'm not going to live it up anymore. And you alluded to this earlier as an Easter egg. How does it end?
Yeah, it's an end where he basically just has the paper boy gives him the paper, and it's Danny Ketch, who is kind of the epitome of the 90s at the time too.
Yeah, he was. He's Ghostwriter of the 90s.
And Ghostwriter of the 90s.
He was forced, by the way, and basically it ends with him like, he's like, I'm done. Here, let's just take a nice picture with me and my wife and this kid who's just a average, everyday, ordinary kid. What's your name, son? Danny Ketch. Yeah. Oh, I get that. Haha. That was actually forced on. That was actually forced on them by editorial. Like, you need to find a way to bridge it to modern day comics. And then he was like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, you got to do it. And he's like, all right, fine, we'll do this character. And he's like, it's funny. He's like, 25 years later, are we talking about Danny Ketch? No, we're talking about this book. We didn't need that moment,
Right. Yeah, it makes it kind of gross. It's kind of like the force like that. It's like, ooh.
Yeah.
But
is that the end of the story?
No, it is not, because there's also an epilogue that it comes out. It was released in 2019. It was just a quick issue epilogue, and it's set right at the beginning of the Bronze Age, or right at the beginning of the Bronze Age.
It's like around 73, I think.
Right, and it depicts an issue of X-Men 98. The all-new X-Men. Excuse me.
All new X-Men, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, all those cats.
Or Nightcrawler, Colossus, Banshee.
Yeah.
And everything, which it's very funny that's the issue, because one of the reasons at the time that Marvel's 2 didn't work, or just more modern age stories, Bronze Age stories, was Alex Ross was not wanting to draw Wolverine or the Punisher.
Yeah. It's like, that's not what I'm going to do. And then, like, literally out the gate on this first issue, there's Wolverine.
First issue. Yeah, it happens around Christmas time, and there's a Sentinel attack, because you can't have an X-Men story without a Sentinel attack.
Of course.
And there's just more depictions of just the Storm panel. Beautiful. It's so, and how she changes into her costume is just so cool. And then Banshee kind of taking a leadership role in this, like them. Yeah. it's a great epilogue issue. It's definitely, if you are reading Marvels, it's definitely something to follow up with.
It's interesting because there was a follow-up series called well, we can get into like the sequels and the sequels that fell
No,
apart,
so
but
that, yeah. No, we can
uh,
go into that now. I mean, we talked about the epilogue, so let's go talk about the sequels.
so there was a sequel. There was a bunch of failed sequels.
Mhm.
Well, when I say bunch, I mean like there was a failed sequel called Marvel's 2 Seduction of the Innocent, or it's also called Crime and Punishment. And like Josh had said, it was going to be kind of more focused on like the 70s and the 80s up to like basically the modern age. And it was going to be a lot more dark and gritty and grim. And like you said, Alex Ross had no desire to do it. And Busiek had gone about 16 pages into the script. He's like, yeah, well, I'm not going to do this. Because also the research, I had mentioned this like earlier, that, at the time there was like 8 issues of a month, so it's easy to do all the research. When you get to like the 80s, it's like there's like 20, 30 issues coming out. It's like, and you've got to, correlate where was this person? Where was that person? He was like, I'm just done.
Mm.
But they did end up eventually in 2008 doing an actual full sequel to Phil Sheldon. It was called Marvel's Eye of the Camera. And you pick up basically where Marvel's left off. And you have Phil Sheldon, like, I'm going to go back and make that book I promised I was going to make. And it's him. And then getting cancer, and because he had been a heavy smoker. And it's basically all the way up to the end of his life. Um, Two notes to
Which,
that, go ahead.
yeah, no, I wasn't that much of a fan of Marvel's Eye of the Camera,
Yeah.
and not because, it's a different artist, because Alex
Yeah.
Ross didn't return for this, and it's still
No.
Kurt Busiek, but it was more, what I wasn't too much of a fan was because it was more of a Phil Sheldon story and
Yes.
not Phil Sheldon going through the Marvel story,
Yeah.
which there was barely any really mentions of big moments in Marvel at the time. And that was the disconnect, I think it was, from the first Marvels.
I think it's there, but you're right. It's more focused. And keep in mind also, Roger Stern helped co-write some of the last issue. I think 3 through 6,
Mhm.
he helped Busiek write. Um, but yeah, it's much more focused on Phil's life and like his legacy and like what does a legacy mean, especially when you're that close to death. There are those moments, and I think they did research them properly. Like, okay, hey,
Yeah.
this is yeah, like, oh, not Inferno, but like I'm blanking right now. But
That Secret
there are
Wars was mentioned, like
that's right.
Beyonder stuff. I mean, but it wasn't throughout the story. Like, it would have like a couple moments, like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
It wasn't weaved through the story as much as Marvel's, I thought, was,
Yeah, Marvel's is
or
much
woven.
more. Well, and I think it was Marvel's is such a perfect balance in that. Is like you did get like you got Phil's like home life, and then you got like Marvel Universe stuff in history. And I think it was
Mhm.
such a good blending of the two. I think this is good if you're interested more of like what happened to Phil. Like, well, then this fills it out. Find out he
Mhm.
gets cancer, and that's
Pun
the end of it.
pun intended. Pun intended.
Uh,
This fills it out. Yeah.
yeah. So what I was going to say though is interesting though is this took place in 2008. The epilogue came out in 2019, and there's a great moment where Wolverine's like says to Phil, "Hey, you got a light?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't smoke anymore." And he's like, I'm not sure about that, pal. I can
Yeah.
smell it on you."
Right.
I just thought
Like, he
I thought it
fooled
was
me.
yeah, it's like it's a nice allusion to what happened, what will happen to him.
But what I really like, what I did like about Eye of the Camera, though, is you see what happened to that little
Phil,
girl, the
yep,
mutant,
yeah,
in
Maggie,
Marvel.
Maggie, I
She
believe her
showed
name.
Maggie, yeah, Maggie. She shows up again. You kind of get what
Yeah,
happened to her, and she
yeah.
comes at the right time too. It's like the best timing.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, like they allude to her a little bit, like kind of reference her, like it's like just enough to kind of pique your interest. And when she drops at that one issue, I'm like, oh God, Maggie, she's
Right.
back. I thought that was really, and it wasn't like she's like some Deus Ex Machina like thing where she saves his life. It's like, nope,
Mhm.
she helps give him closure though, you know?
Wait, she does, because with her powers,
Yeah.
because I mean, she's very her face is very skull like, but she has these huge eyes, and her powers are like very eye based. Like, she can do X-ray vision.
Yeah.
And she looks at Phil. You don't see what she sees. She looks at it, and then she just gets very sad, and she
Yeah. She
knows
knows. Yeah.
this is, this is kind of the last moments with him.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
yeah, like I said, if you can take it or leave it, I don't think it's required reading though. I think
Mhm.
you read Marvels, and especially with the epilogue, you kind of get like the gist of
Yeah,
it.
I think
You know?
epilogue is. I think epilogue is a must follow, and then Marvel's Eye of the Camera is okay if you just really want to. The art
If
is still great. It's not
Yeah, it's
Alex
still good.
Ross, but it's still
No,
great.
it's like if Marvels is an AA plus, like Eye of the Camera is like a B minus. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's just surpassing enough. You're like, okay, if you like I said, if you really want to know where it filled, you have to read it. But if you're just like, I could take it or leave it, move on.
Yeah, and
But
then on the other side
go
of the coin, though, too, of like a pseudo sequel, though, was like
yeah,
Ruins, which was kind of like what if Marvels in a sense.
I believe the
Yeah.
line at the time was called Alternaverse, which is what they labeled all of their like sort of what if. And Ruins was a part of that. It was actually written by Warren Ellis, who was a young Warren Ellis at the time. Who wasn't the Warren Ellis we know now. Uh, but yeah, it was a 2-issue miniseries, which like took like, what if everything went shitty? And
Hmm.
Phil Sheldon is gonna depict that with his photo. I mean, go first because I have nothing good to say right now.
No, yeah, it's if you see it, it just looks like I don't think it's a follow up read. I don't it's the antithesis of what Marvels is and what Marvels was trying to do, which may
Yeah,
be great for some, but it wasn't my bag of tea, my cup of tea, my
yeah, come
bag
see
of
it.
ice, my my
Yeah,
bag.
I remember reading it as a kid. I'm like, whoa, this is so dark and edgy. Like this is crazy. And reading it now, it felt just not dirty is not the word, but I felt like just like sick kind of after reading. Like there was nothing good about it where I was like, oh, you felt invigorated after reading it. Like you were feeling good after reading Marbles. This, like, it just felt like just felt sick afterwards. It didn't have any, and I say like despite Warren Ellis's like problematic past with women, I really do like Warren Ellis's writing a lot. I do like I
Mhm.
love Transmetropolitan. I love some of his X-Men stuff, but this just left me feeling like just not good. I didn't feel
Yeah.
good reading this. There's nothing about it like, oh man, this is required reading. I do not recommend people reading it. I say that sadly, but it's like it just yeah, you can pass on that one.
Yeah. And another kind of pseudo sequel though as well though was because BC couldn't do Marvels 2, he kind of retrofitted it for his own book that's outside of the Marvel
Yeah.
continuity and actual Marvel books called Astro City.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
that was have you read that one?
I have here and there, but I haven't read like fully.
So yeah, basically I think he teases the main characters, Royal and Charles Williams, that are the main characters of this arc of Astro City called the Dark Age. He teases them in, I don't think he does it in Marvels. It might be in Eye of the Camera, but he
Mm,
references the two of them. And it was going to be basically two brothers who face some tragedy. One becomes a cop and one becomes a crook. And it's about like their eyes through the Marvel universe, seeing like again, we were talking about the Punisher and the Wolverine and the darker side of
mhm.
everything. He reappropriates a lot of that stuff and puts that into that. He put that story into Dark Age and rewrote it. Um, I started to read it before we started recording, actually, or not recording, but before we started researching all of this.
Mhm.
It's good if you're into this, like you should read Astro City. I mean, that was going to be a recommendation, but if you're into
Mhm.
like Marvels, a definite like compendium to that would be Astro City. You know what I mean? If that
Oh,
makes
totally.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, yeah. And then speaking of though, also like just if you really liked Alex Ross and you really like Kurt Busiek, like some other books that we think would be great to follow up with, and we might even have episodes about this later on. But I think we can both agree, kind of the top tier Alex Ross book, other than Marvels, is Kingdom Come.
But it's by my boy Mark Wade. Yo,
Yeah. Yeah, no, nothing else needs to be said. Kingdom, we are going to have
we were gonna
an
do it. We
episode
will
about
do
Kingdom.
it.
Yeah,
Absolutely doing a
but
Kingdom Come episode.
definitely read it if you like Marvels. It was the next Alex Ross book that came
It
out,
was.
and it's definitely different. It's also an anti, like how Marvels was like an anti edge lord of the '90s at the time. Like Kingdom Come was also in a sense that
It was.
the anti.
It was a reaction to that. It was
Yeah,
absolutely a reaction to that. And with that book, though, instead of going to the past to mine that nostalgia, it's moving to
you're
the
right.
future to mine that nostalgia, which is interesting. We'll
It's
save that
in a lot
discussion
of.
for later.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that was that had retrofitted DC Universe as well. And then
Bill,
also a good follow up to that is Justice.
Yes. So they say Phil Sheldon, I believe, makes an appearance in Kingdom Come. He's one of the characters in the background. One of
Yes,
the
I bet
shots.
you. Yeah, yeah.
Little Easter egg
I
there.
do. And then with Kurt Busiek, I mean, some of our favorite books from him, I think, is like Thunderbolts. Might be one of those ones, early Thunderbolts, like the beginning of Thunderbolts, we'll say.
Yeah,
Uh,
he did. Yeah, he did about, I want to say, like 30 issues before Fabian
mhm.
Nicieza took over. But I'm a Thunderbolt stan. Like, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
Like, even though the Thunderbolts have now become like the Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad, the initial version of the Thunderbolts was really interesting.
One of the biggest twists of
Oh yeah,
comics of all
that
time.
first issue is a huge
Um,
twist. Huge
yeah,
twist.
and then we got Astro City, which we
Yeah,
just talked about, and then he had an amazing run on the Avengers.
58.
One of my favorite runs of the Avengers.
It was it's it was a reaction again to like coming out of that Heroes Reborn stuff that Liefeld and Jim Lee and all those cats were doing to like relaunch the Avengers, and it's him and George Perez, and it's just like
Yeah.
if you hey you like that 70s 80s run of like Avengers, well guess what, we're doing it again, and it's great and I love it.
So when I was reading Marvels too, I was had in the back of my mind like what kind of moments in modern Marvel history would Phil or his assistant that you meet in the book kind of be covering, and I kind of made a quick list, and, and anything that comes to your mind too while I'm kind of reading off these lists, or we can discuss it. But it's more of just kind of going back not too far, but far enough where it wasn't covered by by even the eye of the lens, or what. I
I have
can't
the
believe
camera.
I have like eye of the camera. I don't know why I have these brain farts in the middle of things we just talked about, but
To be
it's
fair, it's like late.
yeah, I know it's past my bedtime. So I was thinking, one moment that would be cool to kind of see how his reaction and just reactions of the people behind it's the moment in Infinity Gauntlet when Thanos does the snap, then half of the population of the universe is gone.
From a human perspective, that I mean they covered it a little bit in the movie, but that would be cool to see in the comic book realm.
Yeah. And just how him freaking out, his family. I mean, he has two daughters. I don't mean to get grim, but two
Well,
daughters,
what
and see how it happens.
there's that
One of the
great
two
moment I
daughters
think
leaves.
in Infinity Gauntlet when like Peter Parker has that realization. He's like, "Oh my God, Mary Jane," and you just see him
Right.
bolt. It's that. It'd be the
Yeah,
same with me if like this happened in real life. I don't care who's in my way. I'm finding my son and my wife. You know what I mean?
for sure. For sure. And then another moment is the introduction of Krakoa,
Oh, that'd be
as
interesting.
because that'd be a fun kind of to see them in the press conference or
Yeah,
something, or how they react
or the
to
Hellfire
especially the
Hellfire club party.
yes, oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, the Hellfire
Yeah,
Gala,
yeah,
and
that's it. Hellfire Galaxy.
seeing even like Alex Ross try to
Oh
draw that stuff
God.
would be great. Um, Another one was Secret Invasion. Mostly the aftermath. Like, so Norman Osborn coming out saying, "I saved everybody, and I'm the head of Shield now," and
Well, because Norman
changing
Osborn's
everything.
still respected in the human element. Because remember, even when he
Yeah,
dies as Green Goblin, like, people are just like, "Oh,
just don't know.
billionaire industrialist died. Also, Green Goblin died." They don't realize the two I believe, were the same person, at least on a public level.
Another one was Civil War.
Yeah.
Either the introduction of the Superhero Registration Act, or just the end where it's the death of Captain America.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, he would
I
be
think
one of the
that'd be
journalists. So they'd be one of the journalists on the
exactly, yeah.
stairs when he gets popped. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then Peter Parker being unmasked is another part of the Civil War. That'd be
That'd be
great to
cool. Get a reaction.
and yeah, and then the Captain America Agent of Hydra, the Hydra moment
Hail
would be
Hydra.
yeah, the Secret Empire stuff, right? Secret Empire, yeah.
Yes.
The moment in I know it's not our favorite storyline, but Avengers Disassembled towards the end,
Oh,
where
Hawkeye.
they do the yeah, well, not just Hawkeye, but just the vigil that they have in the end of the book,
Yeah.
and being there, documenting it, it would be great. And also, which I think would be really fun to see, is them covering or going to see what's happening with Asgard when it shows up in
Oh, in
Oklahoma.
Montana. Oh, Oklahoma. That's right. Oh,
Oklahoma,
Montana.
yeah,
Yeah.
where
Sorry.
it's like
Sorry.
no, probably like 20 feet above Oklahoma, and seeing them cover that, the news of that and how they feel about that. I think that would be fun to see in some interactions of the Asgardians with them, and also with going back to the the Secret Invasion part in Norman Osborn, the introduction of Dark Avengers
Oh yeah, that'd be
would be
fun.
fun. So little fun stuff like that, I think would have
Yeah.
been fun to see. Just the Marvels take.
Yeah.
Did you have any of that off the top of your head, or do you have any?
It was funny, like, you're bringing that up, and reminds me of, like, 2 things. One, like, you do see there was one other miniseries that kind of is like a pseudo version of, what they were trying to do with Marvels too. It's called, Code of Honor, and it's from the
Hmm.
perspective of a police officer. I think Chuck Dixon wrote it. It's also
Oh, right.
illuminated, but the art is the art is the art. We'll leave it at that. I'm not gonna if I can't say anything constructive, I'm not gonna say anything at all. Uh But just like you saying that, there's a great moment where, like, Inferno, which is a arc in the X-Men comics where demons come out of New York City, and you see a little bit of that, like where like one of the cops, like he's like, "Why did the engine stop?" And he lifts up the engine, the hood of the car, and there's like a demon mouth in the hood of the engine. He's like, "Whoa!" And he's like, I love. He's like, yeah. Even every day now, I've always had a little hesitation opening a car engine, or opening the hood of a car. So if you're looking for a little bit more of like, again, those retellings, you see a little bit of the Beyonder in that as well. It's I don't it's I like Chuck Dixon. Again, it's fine. I don't know, it's not
Huh.
required reading, but if you're looking for like that slice of life from the ground level, seeing these big events, Code of Honor would be one. One thing you kind of reminded me of when you were talking about all that though is how like Nick Fury shows up for some reason in every issue of the Marvels at some point. I think he shows up in every issue.
Hmm.
But in the first issue, it takes place, World War II before he lost his eye. And this is just one of those
Yeah.
Easter eggs things. Again, Alex Ross shaded it the way the shadows are falling on him, that his eye that normally is covered with an eye patch is
Hmm.
shaded by shadows.
Oh, that's
I just
cool.
thought it was like a nice little, like, again, catch the, like the J. Jonah Jameson theory. But anyway, just
Hmm.
random thoughts I had.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you have any modern moments though that
Oh,
you would
sorry.
think would be the Marvel's touch? Yeah, the answer to the
Oh,
question.
sorry. I thought you meant,
I'm kidding.
you got anything
I'm just
else?
kidding.
You have
No, I'm
anything
kidding. I'm
else?
kidding.
Oh,
I'm just busting. I'm
yeah,
busting
busting my
chops.
chops. Honestly, like I said, I'm a 90s kid, so it
Mhm.
wouldn't be pertinent to show, but I'd love to see some kind of stuff reaction to Magneto, whether it's Asteroid M and like kind of reactions with
Mhm.
that, say that, or even like I'd love to see some of the Savage Land stuff, even though there'd be no reason for them to go to the Savage Land,
Mhm.
as Phil Sheldon or documentary crew. Seeing all the Spider-Mans run around for maximum clonage, the clone
I think that'd
saga,
be good.
that'd be
The
interesting
Clone
to
Saga
see.
thing, that'd be
Yeah.
funny.
The
He
one
sees
that I think
multiple Peter Parkers when he just.
yeah. You're like, "Wait, what? That Wiley kid?" The one that would be interesting, though, would be even though it's not, like, the best story, is Onslaught and watching the heroes, like,
Mhm.
sacrifice themselves to take Onslaught out and disappear, like, what happened to them? And then their eventual return. I think that would be cool, and that'd be something through Phil
Mhm.
Sheldon's eyes that I think would be really fun to see. Or through sort of a camera lens, like, like, they're all gone, and
Mhm.
they come back 12 months later or whatever.
Oh yeah, that would be really fun. Or even the House of M stuff. Maybe see how like an issue where it changes perspective completely, where it's
Yep.
the House of M stuff. So yeah. So I mean, yeah. So again, just when we're talking about the book and all this fun stuff that we're talking about, this discussion, Brian, I can imagine what you're gonna say, but let me just ask this question, this
Yeah.
inquiry. Would you recommend this book to somebody getting into comics or to a casual comic reader?
It's funny, like, I was reading up, like, people's reviews of it, like, post, like, 30 years later, does it still hold up? 99 out of 100 people are like, "Yeah, this is the best, absolutely recommend it." But there was, like, every once in a while, I would read some commentary about, like, how, you know, it doesn't do enough about social justice and stuff like that. It was just interesting. That all aside, as a book, as a nostalgic take on the Marvel Universe and just seeing it through the human experience, through the human eyes, absolutely. This book is beautiful. It's well written. It has heartfelt moments. It has funny moments here and there, but it's also just cram packed with Easter eggs. It's got the thing where like you can read it, and that to me is the perfect definition of an Easter egg, where it's like you can read it and not know it, and you're fine. But if you do know, you're like, that's clever. You know what I mean? It's not
Mhm.
distracting, but if you catch it, you're like, that's awesome. And like I said, I recommend people pick up the 25th anniversary edition of the book. because like it's all annotated. It's like, yep, on this panel is this, on this panel it's that, on this panel it's this, on this panel it's that. You know, so yes, absolutely, I thoroughly recommend it. It stands up. I was gonna do an issue or a thing where it's like top 10 comics that you will bring you to tears. And like I said,
Mhm.
you know, the Maggie stuff in issue 2 is right there with me on it.
And I totally agree with everything you said. At the very end, it's a pretty book. It's just a lot of
Gorgeous.
pretty pictures. A lot of
But you
pretty
know, there's
pictures, but it's also well written.
that's the thing is like any book can be pretty. It's like you have to have both. And this hits
Mhm.
both. You know what I mean? It hits both.
Yeah, it's both very well, and I think it's a we got issues recommend.
Yeah,
And
well,
that little stamp that comes out.
well, the thing is, to that point, it's like again, it cemented the careers of both these creators. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You know, like Alex Ross is Alex Ross because of this. Kurt Busiek is
Right.
Kurt Busiek because of this. You know,
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a great start. It's also, if you have a casual knowledge of Marvel Comics, I think it's a great book to kind of read, to kind of remind yourself and get a little bit more of the ins and outs of it.
well, even if you don't, even if you consider yourself like, oh, I'm an aficionado and I've read, it's like there's still
Mhm.
stuff. Like I've read, you know, 30, 40,000 plus issues of comics that like I was
Brag.
catching stuff in this that I'm like, I didn't know that. That's awesome. You know what I mean? And that's what
Mhm.
I love was like when there's rereadability, you know, and stuff you're learning every single time. And even if you don't, and you just read it like that was just a good read. That's
Mhm.
what you want.
It's a comfort read.
It's just a damn
It
good read.
w It's a comfort read when it's coming from a cranky old guy, the point of view of a cranky old man,
Which I'm a cranky
which
old man,
is
so I identify with him. I don't have the
that's
missing
true.
eye,
It's
but
kinda
you know,
true.
whatever.
That's kinda true. Yet.
Yet,
Not yet.
yet
Yeah,
the night is young.
yeah, you could be watching a fight between the Human Torch and Namor and have a brick thrown at your
Yeah.
eye.
Yeah, there's so many like I said, even like that stuff. Like the fact that like you see like a car melted, it's like, oh, that's from a panel
Mhm.
from Marvel Comics #3 or something like that. There's so much nuance in
If
just crammed
if
into this thing.
you feel like a Pepe Sylvia, and then, like,
So
yeah,
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 yep,
Pepe
this is a
Sylvia,
Pepe.
the Carol, so you're just pointing at the
Carol.
different Alex Ross, Alex
It's true.
Ross.
It's true. It's true.
So, I mean, that's our, breakdown of Marvels. We recommend it. Please go out, give it a read. Go to your local comic book store, check it out at the library, check it out on the Marvel Universe app,
Yep.
Comixology, all
Or
that
just
stuff.
pick up the 25th anniversary edition and really
That
get
too.
into it.
Yes, and there's and also look up the YouTube videos about, like, Alex Ross talks about it a lot. So now, and with that, we gave our recommendation of Marvels. What is our weekly pick or weekly recommendation of the stuff that comes out? That we're currently reading.
You go first.
I will go first. So, book that I am really digging right now. It's the first issue, and it's a Saturday. Talking about nostalgia, it's a Saturday morning cartoon nostalgia. It's GI Joe El Numero Uno. So GI Joe #1, which it's a. What's funny? It's #1, but it's a #1 from something that's been culminating these past few months
Like yeah,
from
year.
different. Yeah. For we're calling it the Interjohn
It's the
universe.
Energon universe. Yeah.
And so it's a culmination of stuff that's been building up with all these separate individual series of Cobra Commander, Destro, Scandal, or the Scarlet, excuse me, Scandal,
Scarlet,
Scarlet,
Duke,
and then Duke and Transformers herself,
and
and
Void
it's kind of
Rivals. Yeah.
and Void Rivals, and coming together, and it's this great first issue of this new GI Joe team led by Duke, and they're on their first mission, and it's just already a fun book, and kind of in a way explains why in the cartoons they had laser guns and stuff already. So it's great. It's a great read. It's
Yeah, it's
something
Josh
Josh
Williamson, right?
Williams, yeah.
And
And
Tom
he has a great
Riley, I
first
believe.
name.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he has a
Tom
great
Riley, I
first
think
name.
is doing. Yeah, Tom Riley's doing the art. It's I haven't had a chance to read it. It's on my stack. I absolutely loved all the precursor stuff going into it. I've
Mhm.
been holding off on that issue just because like I want to sit down and enjoy it. And unfortunately, just been hacked with like so much other stuff to do, comic
Mhm.
related wise, that I haven't like. I want to enjoy it. I don't just want to run through it
Right.
because like the Scarlet stuff was great. The Cobra Commander stuff was phenomenal. The
Amazing.
Yeah, the Duke stuff was so much fun. The Destro stuff is fun. I even like the Transformer stuff. Like it's all fun
Yeah.
stuff. And so I'm really looking forward to sitting down and reading that issue. I even
And
like, I was gonna say I really even like the the continuation of a Real American Hero line that began with Marvel, went to
Mhm.
IDW, and now Skybound is doing it, that Larry Hama's doing it. I've been enjoying that run too. It's like issue 312, and it's still really fun.
We'll have to talk about the G.I. Joe IDW run. I mean,
Well,
it's so good.
there's the two IDW runs. There's the
Sorry.
continuation of a Real American Hero, and then there's the IDW stuff, which this
Mm.
current one by Williamson feels like very much like, you know, not not the byproduct of that, but it's like, I don't know, like that was such an adult take on it. Like I loved that IDW run, so I'm really excited
Mhm.
about this.
Yeah, and he's also doing the Ninja Turtles current book, like, right? So he's kind of like the king of Saturday morning cartoon nostalgia
Well,
right now.
his
He's
Superman
in my
stuff,
wheelhouse.
let's just say he's doing Superman over at DC, and I'm really enjoying that. He's also, if I
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, I think he did the Green Arrow book, and that's also been a lot of fun too. I think
Yeah.
he might have finished that run, but it was totally enjoyable. It was supposed to be only a 6-issue miniseries that they're like, hey, this is kind of cool. Let's just make it 12. Oh, let's go to
Right.
16. It's like,
Let's make
all
him
right, cool.
ongoing.
Like that's the sign of a good. It's like, oh, it's only 6. Nope, now it's 16. You're doing something
Right.
right.
So I mean, that's my pick of the week. What is your pick of the week? What have you been reading?
So as I mentioned, I've been busy with some other stuff, this, and then I actually gave a talk to a bunch of kids about like Jewish creators in comic books. Like Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who created Superman, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, Bill Finger and Bob Kane, who else? Will Eisner, Art Spiegelman, and just kind of like the history of like comic books through the Jewish lens. And one of the books that, I'd read before, but I picked it up again, just was the Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics by Tom Scioli. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, I'm really sorry. But anyway, it's basically a biography of Jack Kirby as a comic book. And it's just Jack Kirby was such a badass. Like such a badass. I did so much research. I was, like I said, I had to research all these cats to talk to these kids about it and all that. And yeah, I don't think it's from the book, but one of the things I found, I should pull up my notes, but basically there was a quote from Stan Sakai about Jack
Mhm.
Kirby. Because remember, it's Kirby and Lee and Siegel and Will. A lot of these cats like went to World War II. Some of them
Mhm.
were posted on bases and stuff like that, but Kirby actually went into the field. Like he was like, he'd go out there and like draw the towns, like, hey, here's where the Nazi nest is, and here's where, like, so he was out there. And there's a quote from Stan Sakai where it says something to the effect of like, yeah, I had a chance to meet Jack Kirby when he lived out, when Fantagraphics was out in Agora Hills or out in Agora. And, I went to a couple parties and got to know him. And eventually Jack would start talking about his time in World War II. And the stories would always end with him killing 4 Nazis. He hated Nazis. It's like, that's great. And so anyway,
Oh
yeah,
man.
Jack Kirby, man, what a dude. What a dude.
And this is why he was called the King, Jack the
Yes.
King Kirby.
Jack the
Yeah.
King Kirby. So anyway, if I'd recommend that if you haven't had a chance, if you don't know enough about Jack Kirby, get out there. Because I unfortunately was one of those people who like thought Stan Lee was like the man and did it all. It's like
Mhm.
the more you read about it, it's like, don't get me wrong, like Lee deserves the credit he gets, but so does Kirby. I know a lot of people will take umbrage with that, like, oh no, Kirby's more. And look, that's a debate for the scholars, and I could
Yeah.
probably talk to you about it, but like I would think, do yourself a favor. You don't know enough about Kirby, read about him. It's worth your time.
Awesome. Awesome. So you have some 2 good recommendations from us, and of course the big recommendation of Marvels. And I think we're kind of wrapping it up now. I think we're done
Yeah.
with this episode. It was a beast of an episode, but it was a
Most
good one.
beast.
I think Marvels deserved it, so it was
Yes.
good. So thank you all for listening. Please be sure, make sure to subscribe and hit us up on our social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram.
How
We
about
got
Blue
Issues
Sky?
Cast.
Let's just say
And
I'm on Blue Sky. I think I'm gonna migrate over there from Twitter.
I think that's what we're gonna start doing. Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
make that jump to Blue Sky, like
Yeah.
everybody else is kind of doing
Yeah.
right now. And if
Excuse
you
me.
really like the episode, please rate us 5 stars and please recommend it to all your
Please.
friends on Spotify. And again, with the social stuff too, if you have something you want us to chat about, or you want something, our opinion, because it's very sought after,
Well, it's
or
funny you should
info.
say that. I ran into one of my kids' friends' father who actually listens to the podcast. His name is
What?
Tom.
What?
Hi, hey Tom, how you doing? I told him I give him a little shout out. He is trying to get back into comics right now, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't even know where to start." So, if you have questions like that and want to know where to start, please.
Yeah, hit us up on the social. I mean,
Yeah.
both either our personal or on the We Got Issues cast,
Told you,
preferably on
Tom,
We
I'd
Got
give you a
Issues
shout out.
cast. And then, so with that though, I mean, it's a good point to kind of tease what we're going to be talking about next episode. We're kind of going away from the big two. We did our DC episode, we did our Marvel episode. Now we're doing an indie episode. What's going to be our next one?
I believe, if correct me if I'm wrong, The Authority by Warren Ellis and Brad Hitch.
I will not correct you because that is correct. So yes, it's
So it's just the
The
Justice
Authority.
League. So it's just the Justice League.
It's just a Justice League. No, we're going to be talking about that because right now there's a great Jenny Sparks book, DC. So it's a good.
But I believe The Authority's in
into that.
development too. There's a movie through
So I think so
through, I
too.
think, James Gunn.
Yeah, I mean, James Gunn kind of says, "Yeah, I'll make a movie out of that. Yeah, sure, I'll make a movie out of this. Yeah, so what's this? Oh, okay, I'll make a movie." So yeah, so we're going to be talking about Authority at the next episode. Again, thank you for listening. Make sure to, if you want to help out the podcast, go on our
Buy some
affiliate
candy.
link. Buy some candy. Go to duffandshaw.com/issues and to help out the podcast. So yeah, thanks again for listening, and we will see you on the next one.
Peace.